Hello, everyone. Welcome to, I know that you have missed the Finance Committee. We were part of your daily life for quite some time. And we're back. Don't worry. There will always be financial things for the City of Albany to deal with. So right now, we do not yet have a quorum, which is fine. We're not yet voting on things. We are joined by committee member Mike O'Brien and council members Richard Conti, Jack Flynn, and Tom Hoey. We are also joined by our incredible staff, Danielle Gillespie, Michelle Andre, and we have part of the Nick duo, Nick Blaze, eager to answer questions as soon as we're ready to ask them. So tonight we're going to start off for interviews for the Board of Assessment Review. We had two candidates, one of them canceled, and so we'll be interviewing Frank Cosgrove, who, I'm sorry, a thing just came in front of me. We'll be interviewing Frank Cosgrove. As people may or may not be aware, the Board of Assessment Review meets to process requests for review that are filled each year in response to property tax assessments and is charged with guaranteeing property owners' rights to fair and impartial decisions regarding property assessments. The Common Council appoints board members for 5-year terms. In the call for applications, it notes that it is a 5-year term, that there's training that's needed for the term, and that members of the board should be individuals with knowledge of property values within the municipality and must attend and complete a training course in order to participate in the hearing and determinations of assessment complaints. I will note that Mr. Cosgrove is currently on the Board of Assessment Review and is actually chair of it. So he will be coming in at 5:45 to interview. We've been joined by committee member Alfredo Ballerin. So at this point, we do have a quorum. Just to note for anything to pass through. Does anybody have any questions for the interviews? Or anything along those lines? Okay, since we have 10 minutes and we do have a quorum and we have a lot of things on the agenda tonight, Tom, if you're willing to talk about your ordinance, I think it's something that, I know this has been something you've been anxious to have moved for quite some time. So yeah, maybe this is something that we can move out of the way in the time that we have. If not, then we can certainly continue discussion after the interviews, but just to make use of our time. So this is ordinance number 42.112.20, and it's an ordinance of the Common Council authorizing the sale to unfortunately, I'm going to butcher this name and I am so sorry, Yili Shukulu of city-owned land bordering 39 Beach Avenue, 51 Beach Avenue, 54 Fountain Avenue, and 48 Fountain Avenue, which is also called the Huron Paper Street. So go ahead, Tom.
Sure. This piece of property was a paper street. It was, at one time, it connected Beach to Fountain. And the city, I want to say about 20 years ago, sold half of the paper street on the Fountain Avenue side to the person that was living next door there. So Yuri is the guy that I know that, he wants to have like trees, and he likes to plant gardens and stuff like that, and he'd like to use the property. It's not big enough to build a house on. It's less than what the USDO qualifies the size. I mean, you always go for a variance, but I don't think he has any intention of building anything there. He just wants to have it. right next to his house, you know, so he can have a garden and stuff like that.
Okay, and note that we are joined by committee member Judy Deshay and also council member Kathy Fahey. So before we have our first interview at 5:45, since we have a lot going on, we are right now taking up ordinance number 42.112.20. Does anyone have any questions? Any committee members? Any non-committee members? Oh, I see you, Judy. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm a little disorganized. It's been a crazy day. Is there a value that has been placed on this piece of property that it's being sold for?
The city said it was $10,000, but they said that they could go out and get it and assess it, you know, have it assessed. So I know that they hired an assessor, and they also hired a surveyor to lay out, you know, the property.
Okay. So that's still being negotiated, but
Correct.
yeah, $10,000 is a pretty standard value in the city for a vacant lot. Do you know the measurements offhand?
I think it's in the ordinance, but it's like something like 25 by 40 or 50.
Okay.
It used to be the full paper street. I think you were just walking in when I explained it. Some 20 something years ago, the city sold half the Fountain Avenue side of that to the neighbor over there. And this has just been like a half a paper street. It doesn't connect Fountain.
Okay.
It said
Okay.
90 by 40.
Okay.
90 by 40. Yeah. Okay, that's actually a full city lot. Yeah. Yeah, I would think that $10,000 is actually a pretty reasonable amount. I understand that an appraisal is being done, but yeah. All right. As long as people are keeping an eye on that.
Could I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to move this out of committee with a positive recommendation.
And a second? Mike seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimous. So that passes through committee with a positive recommendation. Mr. Cosgrove is in the waiting room, so I'll have him come in. Oh, except I think that we surprised him. He probably does not expect to yet go on, so that's entirely our fault. I just want to note that we'll be taking the streets bonding at the end. So we'll deal with the wage increase transfer for this Police Supervisors Association, and then just the discussion of the debt reserve. Although obviously that's not something that we can officially pass through. There was kind of a mix up with timing, so the administration would like us to pass that before the end of the year. And here we have Frank. Welcome, Frank. Thank you so much for coming in for an interview. We appreciate your interest. We also appreciate your many years of service on the Board of Assessment Review. And if you'd like to unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to continue serving on the Board of Assessment Review, and then we'll ask a few questions.
Sure. well, I put this in my cover letter, but I'll sort of, I've been on the board for 10 years. I've been elected chairperson for the last 9. I really like the job. I think I'm good at it. I have a lot of background with tax things. I worked for the state tax department for 30 years. Last thing I did there was I was heading a unit, writing regulations. So I'm used to doing technical things and working with a group and supervising and things like that. So I liked, as I said in my letter, I'm really very interested in making the system fair and impartial. We as a group, we try to, we don't play any favorites. We don't try to look at everything impartially, and so that's a little bit of background that I'd like to keep doing it. I like doing it.
Excellent.
Questions would be better, I think. for me.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And are there any committee members that have questions? Go ahead, Judy, and then Mike, you can go next.
So first, I just want to note that Mr. Cosgrove also laid out more detail about his background in a letter that he submitted to us. Mr. Cosgrove, what do you think has been the most challenging issues or things that you've had to deal with during your tenure?
Well, as I said in my letter, I was in 2016, we had the citywide reassessment, and I was at the Elks. We had members stationed at 5 different places with 2 people assisting us. So that was, and we were more directly working with taxpayers there, so that was challenging just because it was a long haul, and it was, we were there 5 days a week. And also we were trying our best to help people. I think that one thing I found difficult is that there's a lot of people who come or they don't like taxes. That's a start. And they think theirs are too high and they can't afford them, but we have to sort of, we have to walk the line that it's not based on ability to pay, or we have to get at what your house is worth compared to other ones and compared to the sales. So that's been, I'd say maybe that's the most challenging thing, to try to be fair, but to follow the law and to follow precedent and things like that. That's probably but the bulk in 2016, I was going to say too, just the number we had to deal with that year. It was 1,500, 2,000 complaints that we had to deal with, and we had a short period of time, because you would basically, grievance day is like the 4th Tuesday in May, and then you've got to get everything done by the end of June. I mean, most years that's not a problem. We might get a few hundred. But in 2016, there were just so many that we, keeping track of everything and keeping going, that was probably the most challenging time I had.
Just as a follow-up, how many grievances do you usually receive in the course of a year?
Well, it seems like it's a few hundred. This year was a light year. This year, I think it might have only been between 200 and 300, but owing to the situation of the virus, I think less people were thinking about it, et cetera. But it seemed like it's more like 500, 600 more, including residentials and commercials. The assessor would have to tell you exactly, but that's my impression. But in 2016, as I say, it was really it was 3 times that many, or it was just very a lot of them keep, as I say, to keep track of and to deal with and try to be fair and, you know.
Well, thank you. And I really want to thank you for your diligent service on the board. It's important for us to have people who take the responsibility seriously. And I know that you are well respected by the other members of the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Judy on your qualifications and your disposition, and suits you well to serve on the board. Just a question. It's my impression that property values in Albany are going up despite COVID. Is that your impression? And does that bode well for 2021? Are they going to be raising assessments or not? I mean, I've been following prices as they sell up in my neighborhood, and some
Right.
of them have surprised me.
Well, actually, I just checked in with the assessor the other day to just sort of see what was going on, because he had talked about, well, at some point maybe we need to do another citywide, because the property values outpacing the assessments kind of, and to sort of get everybody looked at, and but I guess that's not in the cards. But he did say that the residential values are up. Commercial in general
COVID
down.
apparently didn't affect that at all negatively.
No, you mean the residential?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I heard someone say there was there was not a lot of supply, so it was more of there's more demand than there is supply. So that was one reason. But so yeah, that's been my impression too, that I've heard that someone will, they'll say they'll put it on the market for 200, and then they'll have two or three parties willing to pay that, or maybe go a little above, or yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just add there for clarification for anybody who might be watching, because I received an inquiry on this just the other day from a constituent. What I have, because there is an expectation that there may be reassessment because property values are going up, and I track property sales in my ward, and they are definitely going up. Including somebody who decided he made a mistake in purchasing a piece of property, and a year later sold it for $12,000 more. But my response to that constituent is that in order for us to do a reassessment, it really needed to be in our budget. We needed to have an allocation, because you need to have additional resources in order to do that reassessment. So it was not in our budget. I also don't think that it's an appropriate time to do that because there should be a large opportunity for interaction. And since we hopefully are seeing a point in time after the middle of the year where people can have some more personal interaction and things are not as challenging, that it would be not advisable, I think, for us to move forward with a reassessment this year. I also do want to clarify that when a reassessment is done, it does not automatically increase anybody's taxes. That's not the goal of a reassessment. Right. It's a matter of making sure that everybody is assessed appropriately for the value of their land. So everybody is being treated equitably when we take the total tax levy and divide it amongst the various property owners. So that's the ultimate goal. And one of the reasons why the assessor's office the administration encourages people to challenge assessments that they might think that are inappropriate. It's not an attack, it's a matter of simply making sure everybody's being treated equitably.
Right.
So,
I agree.
Councilmember Bailey has a question.
Thank you, Jenny. Francis, I just want to echo everyone's thanks for your many years of service now on the board. And just a quick question. Actually, I just want to say my son lives on your block. He's like 2 doors down from you. So Harrison and Caroline, they have the 3 little ones now.
Sure.
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask is when you're looking at going through the grievance process with properties, do you notice that the assessments are the other houses on the blocks and in the areas, are they pretty sound in assessments? I mean, I know there was a period where there's a lot of politics involved in how people's properties was assessed. Have you seen that cleaned up over the years since you've been there for so long now?
I really think so. Yeah, it's you know, and we, you know, when we say we get something on a particular street, we'll look at the street and try to you know, fit it in similarly. But yes, I think it. Yeah, I think that I don't think that's a major problem now at all. I think they're pretty much, you could look at a street, different people on one street could look and they could see that, you know, maybe their house is a little different. Maybe the assessment's a little different, but there's no
Totally out
very
of
few,
whack.
if any, that are really out of whack, you know? Yeah.
And is that a change from when you first started?
I don't think I've noticed too much difference. No, I think, well, as far as I know, that's more of a 20 or 30 years ago problem, but
Okay,
I don't know.
just curious. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks again for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, hello, Francis. Thank you for coming and interviewing and for your work on the board. I just got a question. With the nonprofit, the property in Albany, government property and stuff like that that don't pay taxes, does that affect our assessments at all? Does that play into the formulas?
Affect the residential assessments, or?
Yes.
No, I mean, it may, as was described before, it may impact, you know, there's less property to divide the tax levy up, but it shouldn't really, no, we're just looking at what's the market value. And that's what we're doing. We're coming in, you say, someone will come in and say, I think my assessment's too high. My market value should be that. My market value is only this. So that's what we're looking at. We're not, you know, that's, and try to make it, if something looks out of line, to make it more in line with the rest of them. But that's more of your question is more, I think, more of a, because of that, there's less total property in the city to divide up the taxes that are due, but that's not really our problem, our purview, you know, within our purview.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Alfredo.
Hi, sir, and thank you again for all your years of service. We do appreciate all your knowledge and all your skills and all the time you've committed to our city. I just want to go on the record and say I do not support doing a reassessment until 2026. The last time we did a reassessment was 2006. Before that, we did it in 2006. We didn't do one in 2010 when the market dropped and everybody's property value went down. And as someone who bought a house in 2006 and saw my taxes sky right after I bought my house and we did the reassessment, and then my property dropped like $35,000 in 2009, 2010. No one reassessed my property when that happened. So I think we should be fair. If we're gonna do it every 10 years like we do the census, let's do it. I don't think we should do it just because the market went up and now is a good time we can get the high assessments and lock people in on that high assessment. That's just me.
Okay.
That's me. I just think it should be done in a fair way.
Well, of course,
You
I
guys
have no control over when the reassessment's done, but that's more you guys, but,
Well, I'm on the record now. I just want to make sure the assessment happy.
okay. Yeah,
Because
and
I've been on
now's
sorry.
not a good time because things are, it's not an ordinary time, so maybe that, a reason not to do it, to wait, I don't know how many years, but to wait.
I also, and maybe you can give me some insight on this and give us some insight and give everyone that's watching some insight. I feel like when we do the reassessments, the new homeowners are the ones that see their property value go up dramatically. So for example, I bought my house in 2006. Let's just say I bought it for $200,000. My neighbor might have bought their house 20 years earlier and they may have paid $100,000. So when the assessment happens, the reassessment goes up, my assessment goes up to 210 and their assessment goes to 110. But we both have the same neighborhood, similar home, but because the newer buyer just bought, I always feel like they get the raw end of the stick, which is, hey, as I'm getting older, it's benefiting me now as an older homeowner, but as a newer homeowner, and someone that wants to encourage more home ownership in my neighborhood, is there a way we could address that so that the new homeowner doesn't feel like as soon as you buy a home, you're going to get reassessed at a much higher tax bracket?
Well, let me just say that if to the extent that that's an unequal situation where your neighbor has a similar house, which is apparently worth as much as yours, then they should be together. We as a board, we can't raise anyone. That's for a citywide, but a citywide reassessment should take care of that. But the fact that you paid, well, you or whoever paid 200,000, that's an indication of the market value. So yours should be around there, it should be in close to that. But as I'm saying, the other one should be brought up, and that would be something that would happen, should ideally happen in a citywide thing where you're adjusting some up, you're adjusting some down, you're trying to equalize things.
If I can just provide again a little bit of clarification. In the situation that Alfredo described, that other property during a reassessment should not have just gone up $10,000. If it's similar to your property in similar kind of condition, similar features, similar lot size, then it should have been appraised essentially around the same as your particular home at that time during the reassessment. If other properties around you purchased earlier are being appraised significantly lower, then the answer to that is you should be grieving your assessment and going to the Board of Assessment Review with the evidence that the other similar properties around you are being assessed at $110,000. And that therefore it's inappropriate for you to be assessed at $200,000 because they need to look at the relative fairness of it, not only what the market price is. The other thing that I will note is, and I've had many conversations with Trey Kingston regarding assessments. And there is a belief that when you buy a new house at a higher value, that your assessment is automatically increased on that particular property at that time. and that's incorrect. Whatever the assessment was previously, that is the assessment that carries over until there is a complete reassessment or until somebody grieves it. And in the grievance process, the assessments, my understanding is the assessments can only go lower. They cannot be increased above what has been put on the proposed rolls. So I hope that's clarification for you and also for your constituents, because that grievance period, and of course it's awkward for you, Alfredo, as a common council member to grieve your taxes.
I did it twice before I was a council member. So I know the process well. I've actually helped people through the process. I've done it twice in Albany. I've even done it in other municipalities. So
I just want to emphasize to anybody who's listening or to other common council members, it's important to make sure that constituents know when that grievance period is, and that they know that they can, even though the reassessment was done 4, 5, 6 years ago, they can still each year grieve what their current assessment is based upon a variety of factors by looking at the books and saying, gee, I missed this, that my next door neighbor and the neighbor over there are assessed, have houses almost identical to mine and they're assessed less. It's good for people to look at that kind of information and consider grieving that during that particular time period when it comes up.
Right. And I what I always say is we can't help you unless you grieve. We can't go out and so
I totally understand that. And it's
spread the word,
just-
spread the word if people feel that it's not correct.
No, and I've like I said, I've helped people grieve their taxes because one of my other hats is I'm a real estate agent, so I have access to the MLS, so I can pull comps of what's sold recently. So I get it. I just I'm not a fan of the reassessment. Let's do it once every 10 years. let's give people a little bit of a break if we can.
So are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Frank, thank you so much for coming in and interviewing, and especially for your many years of service and for being willing to continue to use your vast professional experience and experience on the board to continue on. We really definitely appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm set.
That's, yeah, all set. Have a good night.
Okay, have a good night. Nice to see everybody.
So the other person that had expressed interest was canceled coming in to interview. I'm not quite, since this is my first, and Judy, I'm not sure if you or Richard can weigh in on the process with this. And
so usually, quite often I will say that we make a determination that if somebody has been providing good service and they have not, not done anything, we haven't received complaints, etc., then we automatically, continue them on. Sometimes we do post for positions. So in either case, once the process is done, once a determination is made, once it's been discussed, the person has come in or the persons have come in, then we usually do a motion to make a recommendation and ask that it be put in the form of a resolution for the appointment of this particular individual to a specific term. So there are prior resolutions. I'm sure Michelle can bring up one. We need to figure out what the end of his new term would be, and make sure that that's accurately reflected. It's about a 3-line resolution that would be done up. So since we have no other candidates that have come in, and since Mr. Cosgrove has provided great service, and I want to note that as chair of the Finance Committee, there's been a couple of issues that have come up during my tenure on the Finance Committee. And he has always been professional. You know, he has that professional background. And I've heard nothing but good for his, you know, from people who have appeared before the board about feeling like they are being treated fairly. And of course, I've heard from the board members and from the assessor that they've been very pleased with his service and his leadership. And with that said, I would like to make a motion to appoint Mr. Cosgrove for another full term on the Board of Assessment Review.
Excellent, thank you. Can I get a second? Mr. Mike seconds. Is
I just
there?
got a
any-
quick question.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. I got a quick question. Did the other candidate cancel because they're not interested in the position anymore? Or
He didn't
stuck in
say,
snow right now? 'Cause
he
I just came in
did
from shoveling
not,
snow myself, so.
yeah, no, he didn't say. He sent an email about a half an hour before the meeting saying that he couldn't attend. So did not have any more details with it.
Is it possible to reach out to the I mean, for me, it's a bad situation we're in, and I kind of feel we should be fair to everybody that's interested. And I'm not questioning our current candidate's credentials or his commitment. I just think in a situation like this where you have 21 inches of snow out there, I'd rather get some clarification. If this candidate said, I'm not interested,
I don't think that it was something that he wasn't interested. But I would also say if it was getting to the meeting, I would understand. But I don't see how, so this is a situation where you can't go anywhere. So I agree. It's definitely something, I wish that he had shared more information to say, I'm unable to attend because, I'm shoveling out the street or whatever it is. However, there was no information given. So it's an unusual situation. I also think if we had other candidates, it would be a difficult, it's a difficult call. So
I guess my question is, do we have his phone number? Can someone reach out to him and see if this is something that he wants to pursue, or if it's a situation where he doesn't want to pursue it, and then it just, we can do it with a clear conscience. I like to do it where we gave everybody an opportunity to speak their mind, and then we made the decision. And as someone that just interviewed 17 individuals for another board, I understand the process can be time consuming, but at least you give everybody the opportunity to express why they're interested.
I agree. The only
didn't attend that we didn't interview. So I understand that process as well.
Right. I would say, so I think there's two sides to this. I think that there's, it's also not entirely fair to put off the decision and then so then do we have Mr. Cosgrove re-interview, because it's not really fair to only interview one person on one night. It also is something that we weren't given, Mr. Forbes did not give us much notice. And I do have an issue with that. I think that it's something, if you knew how, if it was an emergency, you could share that, listen, this is an emergency, I'm unable to come. I'm so sorry, I would really like to do this, but there was no information given. It was just, I'm unable to make it tonight. So I agree, it's a difficult decision. But I guess I would defer to the Finance Committee. We do have a motion with a second. Is this
Did we get a
something?
second? Did we get a second?
Mike seconded.
Okay.
Is this something that you guys think that, I mean, we can try to put it off. I'm not sure exactly when our next committee meeting is. I think that Mr. Cosgrove is still serving until we appoint the next person. So it might be something that we're not necessarily, it might not be, a super pressing issue, but I also would like to be respectful of Mr. Cosgrove for his time that he's put into it, including the time that he's put in on the Board of Assessment. So.
Yeah, and I think that if the other individual was simply a matter that he couldn't make it because of whatever, he would have stated that rather than just a simple statement that I won't be there. And you didn't get it until what, about 4:45?
It was like 4:30, 4:45, yeah.
Okay. I feel comfortable voting for Fran Cosgrove.
So one of the things that I want to note on two things with regard through, actually, I'll make it three. One is Mr. Cosgrove's term is up. So I believe that, we are, past the time for appointing somebody to this position. Two, there is a significant training requirement that goes along with this. And my understanding is that training usually happens in February, coming up. And the other thing is that when we have had people express an interest in the past, sometimes people are not as interested when they find out that for the grievance period, that this is actually essentially a full-time job where they meet during the day. They meet from about 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. For 2, 3, 4 weeks running, Monday through Thursday. I'm not sure about Friday. And that makes it very awkward for a lot of people to be able to commit to doing this for the entire time, which is one of the reasons why we tend to have people who are retired serving on this, or people who are independently employed. So we could, I don't know if the other candidate knows all.
And I would just like to note, Judy, in terms of process, Michelle just reminded me that when it has come to other boards that have come before the council, if the candidate is unable to make that interview, then they are just not included. And I'm sure there could be absolutely exceptions to that. But as a rule, at least since Michelle has been with us, we have not moved forward with that candidate. So if we're going to stick with process that we've utilized for the past several years, which I would like to do, then we would move forward with Mr. Cosgrove. I think it's different because we just had 2 candidates. I think it would feel differently if we had more candidates. But that's the process that we've had. Go ahead, Alfredo.
Like I said, we had 19 and 2 didn't show up. But it was a lengthy process. So if they, it was a much more intense process. I just feel
but then we've had a lot of other boards where it's
and we didn't have a 21-inch snowstorm. So I just wish we had more information. I just wish the email would have been much clearer. I'm canceling because I've seen the time commitment. And because of my, other commitments, I
If
can't.
you'd like, I can read to you the email that he sent.
That's I trust that you're saying that he didn't say any of that.
He said, I am unable to make today's meeting. Is it possible to reschedule?
Okay, so he
And
does,
he sent it 1 hour ago.
well, he does ask to reschedule.
So in the past, we do not reschedule. Michelle responded because our practice is to not reschedule interviews. So she said, we do not no, we don't reschedule interviews.
Okay, I mean,
So we can talk about changing our process, but
no, I understand, but
Currently,
we've
that's our
got
process.
21 inches of snow outside.
So Alfredo,
That's all I'm saying. I just feel like
Alfredo, you just said that you interviewed, I forget whether it was 17. What? 17?
yeah, we had 19, 17 showed up.
It was
All right.
candidates.
So for those other 2 candidates, did you reschedule?
No.
No, but we also,
Okay, Alfredo.
I understand that, but we also,
Alfredo.
so I will
I mean,
also.
you've got to be. I mean, I'm just looking at it. I
Alfredo, the other
That's
thing
why I
is
was
Danielle tried
muted
calling
before.
both of the numbers. One is disconnected and one, there's no answer. So we did try to reach out. And this is our practice. I don't, on my watch, I don't want to change practice and procedure unless we're specifically talking about our own practice and procedure.
I'm just saying, I'm looking at the environment we're in.
So we have a motion
at
and a
the-
second.
Yeah, let's take a vote.
That's fine, yeah.
All in favor of moving forward?
Aye.
That is Farrell, O'Brien, and Deshay in the affirmative. And any negatives? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining not because I don't think this is the most qualified candidate. I just wish we would have an opportunity to hear both. So that's my reason for abstaining.
We'll definitely encourage Mr. Forbes to apply again.
So it has nothing to do with the candidate that's being moved forward's credentials. I think he had impeccable credentials, and I just feel I would have liked to be able to have had both individuals interview.
That would have been absolutely ideal. I agree. Unfortunately, we're not given that opportunity. So
here's one of the things that we know about Mr. Cosgrove. He knows what the obligations are, and he has been meeting those obligations and showing up when he needed to show up at a particular time and place. And for the Board of Assessment Review, that's something that they, you need to show up. And so, when we have such a well-qualified individual, it'd be one thing if we had reservations about this particular individual. I have absolutely no reservations. He's perfectly qualified, and I'm glad that we are moving forward with him.
So, and I would like to continue to move forward. We use the process that the Common Council has utilized for our board appointments. And I think that that's a really important thing. If we would like to change that process, I think that that's a separate conversation that should be brought up in governmental operations. And I think it's a valid thing to bring up, but that's not what I would like to take up in our Finance Committee meeting. So next up, I would like to discuss, and I should note, we're joined by the other half of the superpower duo, Nick Riley. We also have Randy Milano with us. And so I would like to discuss resolution number 115.121.20R, which is a resolution of the Common Council consenting to the transfer of unassigned funds to cover wage increases owed under the Albany Police Supervisors Association collective bargaining agreement.
How much are we transferring?
Hold on. We are transferring, pardon? I believe it's $940,877.
And this is only for the supervisors.
Correct, yes. This is part of the collective bargaining agreement.
And how many people are in that particular unit?
That I don't know. Do either of the Knicks know?
Yes, I think we have, I'll give you that number right now, and this would also affect some retired supervisors too. So it'll be higher than the number currently employed, but roughly we have 16 lieutenants in the police department and 39 sergeants. So at a maximum, that many employed current City of Albany supervisors, and then it would include whatever people were covered under that period that have since retired too.
I believe that number is 7 of the people retired, Blaze.
There you go. Perfect.
So according to my math, it's 62.
And this impacts, this transfer specifically to approve it, the transfer for 2017 through 2019. We don't need to do that for 2020 because there is already money in the budget available under salaries. Is that?
Correct. 2021 has this all taken into consideration. This is just the retro for as part of the decision there.
Changes are being requested to cover wage increases owed to members of the Albany Police Supervisors Association for the years 2017 to 2019, as detailed in their collective bargaining unit. So this transfer of unassigned fund balance is only for those years. There's additional money that is actually owed for 2020 that is currently available in salaries for those positions in the 2020 budget because of us being underemployed.
That is also correct.
Okay. And we kind of need to do this because it was part of a collective bargaining negotiation.
Right. Yep.
So I'm ready to move this unless people have questions, other questions.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Alfredo.
How are we doing with our other collective, I'm sorry, thank you, Cheryl. How are we doing with our other collective bargaining agreements that are still out there?
The city has a contract, current contract with every collective bargaining agreement that we are allowed to negotiate with by law. I believe that it's just APOU that we're not current with, and we're not able to negotiate with them because they have an internal legal dispute, and until that's settled, we can't engage.
Okay, so all of our other contracts with all of our other unions except this, the one that has the issues have been settled, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, Nicholas, are the dispatchers settled too? Because I understood it that they were going to arbitration maybe.
So the dispatchers are one of the three components of APOU. So with that internal dispute, I don't know, I believe that they're still current, but that they may, this is a good question. Actually, I wish Mike was on, but they are part of APOU. There's APOU non-sworn, APOU sworn, and APOU dispatch. Now, the detectives That's a designation that we just give internally, and it's not really mentioned in the agreements outside of who gets an allowance or a stipend. And then that was who wanted to fork off. So I don't know if actually dispatch is tied to that.
No, they're not. I know that they're still part of Council 82. So, but they went to arbitration. So that's why I know they had to move forward. I was just, because a friend of mine's a dispatcher, so I know kind of what's going on. But they've been waiting for a contract, and I just wanted to let Alfredo know that, yeah, there is another union that's waiting.
I'll take.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other, oh, Judy, you had another question? Are there? Go ahead.
Well, actually, there's two things now. I just want to say that I would love that. I'm sorry, my husband is dispensing Advil for some reason. We had a little workout.
I could totally use some. My back hurts from shoveling.
So, so I would love clarification of that particular issue. It's not really germane to our passing and acting on this particular resolution, but I do think it would be beneficial for us to have that background information. And if you can, get that to us in the next week or two, I'd be happy. My guess is other members of the council would like clarification as to all of those designations and where do we sit with those contracts, et cetera. So the other thing I was going to note, I'm very appreciative of the fact that the resolution itself does put the total amount in the body. It wasn't put in the title, but it's put in the body of the resolution. And that is a practice I would like to see us continue. In the past, when I first started on the council, the amount that we were authorizing for transfer wasn't necessarily included in the resolution. And I think that for paper tracking purposes and for us to know what we're authorizing, that's very helpful. And I just wanted to point that out to people. I'm ready to make a motion to move resolution 115.121.20R forward with a positive recommendation.
Can I have a second? I'm sorry, what was the second?
Both Mike and
Alfredo.
Alfredo.
Yeah.
All in favor? That is unanimous. We move forward. Next up, I'd like to just, while we have the next here, although it has not been introduced, the timing was a little off. So I would like to discuss in the Finance Committee meeting. So the Finance Committee has a definite opportunity to ask any questions on resolution number 121.122.20R, which is a resolution authorizing the appropriation of $5.3 million from the debt reserve fund to pay for bonded debt obligations. I don't know if one of the Nicks would like to talk a little bit about this. And then ideally, I'd like to take a straw poll if Finance Committee members would be comfortable moving this forward on Monday night when it is introduced.
I can certainly speak about this one. As many of you, I'm sure, are aware, because of the financial projections for the year end that Mike has shared with the council, we're projecting a deficit for this year. If we don't do anything, that amount will settle all of our obligations with fund balance, and that will just be lessened, the amount we have in our undesignated fund balance. We have an option to utilize some more of our debt reserve and pay down debt with that and not use funds that we had already obligated to pay that debt. So this really has no impact on the amount of money that we would owe anybody at the end of the year. Our numbers would be exactly the same. We still have to make that debt payment one way or another. Our rationale was just, why not use the debt reserve that we have available to us, especially because we think that this is a particularly hard year. And although it may not be great in coming years, we are hoping that it's going to gradually get a little bit better. So it's kind of our rainy day fund for debt. And, this is the rainy day. And yeah, essentially, we're just asking to increase the authorization for the use of the debt reserve to apply towards debt. And another supporting detail I should mention is that we crunched the numbers and looked at how, as you know, we had some good news this year before a lot of the bad news, and we were taken off of the Office of the State Comptroller's fiscal stress score or system. They have the susceptible, or significant distress and moderate. And we had gone significant, moderate, susceptible, and then this year they had taken us off. And a pretty heavily weighted factor in that is the amount of available fund balance that you have. So if we do this and we increase this authorization and use debt reserve, we'll still have the fund balance available to us. It'll improve our score with the state comptroller's fiscal stress system. And it's not an additional use of reserves. It's use of a more restricted type of reserve for the exact purpose that it was saved for. So if anything, it's just allowing us to have that same amount of money in a more general reserve account, our general unassigned fund balance, and it would improve our score with the state. So that's the rationale behind that.
And how much is this for? Because it's not on the ones we were going to consider, but I'm willing to consider. How much are you transferring?
It would be increasing from 1.8 to 5.3, so $3.5 million increase in debt reserve.
Oh, gosh. So this is always a little confusing to me. So what are we using in 2021 in the way of debt reserve? Are we going to still have we already put what?
That number's not changing, Judy. The number in 2021 is not changing.
450,000.
That's all we're using out of debt reserve
Correct.
in 20?
How much do we have left after we do this? That's the key question.
Right. Well, that's not as important as how much is in our fund balance, but
Yeah. So kind of going off of the point that Nick Blaze was making is our.
I get it. I get it. One's restricted, one's not. I just want to know how much will we have after this, and then how much will we have in our fund balance as well, as Judy said, after this.
I mean, Nick, if you're in the ERP, we could probably get you a more accurate answer. I would assume that based on this increase, that would be using up pretty much the remainder of our debt reserve balance. But our fund balance would still be, it would still be fairly large. That's what this number is.
Yeah, this would be using the near entirety of the debt reserve.
And then how much would we have in the fund balance? I mean, I missed that number. I don't know if Nick said it, but it got a little squawky. For me, I want to know if you're telling me we're gonna have 15 million in our fund balance, then that makes me feel a little bit better.
Fund balance is and these are, I believe, our last annual audited numbers. So they've changed over the course of the year, but just going off of something that Ken had sent me, fund balance unassigned was 14.3 million. So, I mean, that would be 3.5 million lower if we didn't do this.
And how much of fund balance how much are we still gonna have to use from fund balance? I know we were talking about 4.8 million, back in the summer. Is that still gonna be 4.8 million, or is this gonna be, if we switch this 3.5, we don't have to use any of it?
Well, we're going to be 900,000 shy of that because of the retro for the supervisors. So that's one factor to consider. And I would say that we're still looking at, yeah, as I think a $7 to $8 million deficit for 2020.
And that's gonna come out of fund balance?
Correct, but we won't need to use as much fund balance if we utilize our debt reserve to pay down debt. And if we do that, you know, also like I said before, it'll look, our financial rating from the state of New York will be
I get
healthy.
that. So you're saying our total gap for 2020 is 7 point. What's our total gap for 2020? I guess my question is
Probably about 8 million.
8 million. And of that 8 million, we're gonna use you're asking for us to use 5.3 from debt reserves. So we don't have to use fund balance. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
So from the
But that's actually factored into the deficit. This move doesn't really affect our deficit at all.
So Alfred, I guess to answer your question, the
Yes,
fund
please.
balance would be around $10 million at the end of 2020. The unassigned fund balance would be at $10 million. The debt reserve would be close to depleted. There's going to be around $500,000 remaining for the 2021 appropriation, which will be used by the end of 2021. But our unassigned fund balance would be around $10 million.
Yeah, I was shaking my head because Alfredo's question was asking if this will reduce what we need to take out of the fund balance by 5.3 million. It'll change that by 3.5 million because the 1.8 million was already in our budget for 2020. So $10 million sounds about right. And then how much were we taking out of the fund balance for the 2021 budget?
For the 2021, we weren't taking anything out of fund balance. Or out of the debt reserve, you mean?
Oh, never mind. I forgot.
I'd
We're
hope-
going to have complete revenues except for sales tax, $1 million reduction in sales tax. We hope. Oh, gosh.
So are there other questions?
I did, by the way, while we were talking, I did confirm, I did pull out the 2021 budget. I do see it is $450,000. And I can't find my notes from our last conversations on how much was left in the debt reserve, but this is not out of whack with what my recollection was on that. So I'm glad that we have those funds there to assist us in this way.
Yes, hopefully your unsaid point that hopefully you are correct that everything will come through, but it is absolutely a concern.
Well, knowing that we have, you know, it's not ideal to, but you know, fund balance to some extent is the reason why you want 10% is so that you have that rainy day fund.
Absolutely.
And if there was ever a rainy day, it's these days.
It's I would say it's snowing outside like crazy. It's entirely accurate right now. So could I get a straw poll of finance committee members that are comfortable with moving this forward on Monday night?
So this
I'm
was,
okay. I do want to note that I think that it would probably be helpful to have the infamous Nicks present, or at least one of them, to explain this to the rest of the council during caucus.
You're a package deal, Judy.
their superpowers can't happen when the Knicks come together. If one of you or both of you could, Judy has an excellent point, could explain this to caucus, that would be very helpful on Monday.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mike, you were,
Yeah, this has already been introduced and technically is on the agenda. We just didn't think it was on the active agenda, right? And it hadn't been.
no, so this will be introduced on Monday.
Oh.
So it was not, it's there, the timing was somewhat off. I think that all of our meetings, since all of our meetings are seem a little bit earlier this year than other years, like they're falling slightly differently. So I think that their timing just happened to be off with it. So it'll be introduced and should be passed on Monday in order to obtain the best financial benefit from it.
I'll
Well,
also note that this is not one of the routine end of the year transfers.
It is not, no.
This is not one of the routine resolutions. So I gave Jenny a heads up about some of the other ones that we need to do with the bids and some of the other things. But this one is a little different, and it is the kind of thing that you don't necessarily know what you need to do until the end of the year. And this is clearly a prudent move. I don't see much value in holding on to a lot of funds in debt reserve. It's nice when we manage to accumulate some so that we can lift some of the burden of paying off our debt service through using them, but I would much rather have a fund balance.
Yeah, and that's the way the state controller looks at it too. So I guess I'd be good with that.
Okay.
And
Excellent.
I want
Thank
to just
you.
echo the same thing. I mean, it makes no
Great.
sense to hold on to restricted funds and when you can use them for this purpose and give you more unrestricted funds you may need.
Alfredo, you have the best background sounds ever, and you should always feel comfortable. Sometimes it's better to have two Alfredos. You could see if it's the same superpowers as two Nicks. And that way, you don't know unless there's two Alfredos, we can try it out. So
He's got way more cooler superpowers than I do.
I just try to convince, I just like to see like all the babies. So, so fantastic. We are now in the exciting part of our committee meeting where we shift to talk about streets. So Randy, you are on, and we appreciate you waiting, but I will say that you have made us wait as well. So turnabout is fair play. So these are kind of a package deal. The different, so what I'm sorry, it sounded like somebody started saying something. So I think it would be great if we just started discussing the ordinances, and then we can, since the information kind of comes together. So
Jenny,
yes.
before we start,
Yes.
I'm just noticing that it looks like we have dropped one of the necessary ordinances off our committee agenda. There's actually 3, I think. The one that I think we're missing is the ADA compliance, 39.1.
Yeah, it's on there. Oh, great. 36, 37, 38.
I think it may be 37, 38, and 39.
Right.
Oh, so they're just misnumbered on our,
No, for some reason we have,
But we have the brown field on there. So there,
why
I-
do we have the brownfield on there?
I think that was just a mistake because that's already been passed through.
Okay,
I'm not sure, does that impact if we're able, because I believe.
Let me check the original notice, because I think the original notice got messed up when it was amended. One second, let me check. I'm in a CC share right now.
All three ordinances are attached to the package, but they aren't all listed in the header. So, I don't know, is that good notice?
Sorry, one second. The internet is very slow. Oh my God.
That is always what happens. Also, anytime you really need to print something, your printer decides not to work.
So it was on the original one. I think it got messed up when it was amended, but one second, let me. The updated version. I might have sent you the wrong one. The updated version does have that was noticed, does have 39 at the end. I think the wrong one was sent to you guys just now.
so Jenny,
Mm-hmm.
under the state open meetings law, you need to notice a meeting, but you don't necessarily need to notice everything you act on. The agenda doesn't need to be publicized. Just the fact that, a particular body is meeting. Generally, you want to provide the public with notice. The thing that I'm less familiar with is what we adopted as our local requirements in Mr. Hoey's ordinance.
I believe you have to indicate what's on the agenda.
So what I would say is, I think we can move forward. We also have the ability to discharge something out of committee. So I would say we can move forward and discuss the pieces. And if it's something, we can have JR make sure that we're following it appropriately. And if it needs to be discharged out of committee, then we can discharge it out of committee.
So Richard, do you have to notify people the meeting before that you're discharging something out of committee, or can we as a committee act to discharge something without taking action on it and allow it to be acted on by the Common Council?
The council can discharge something. Ordinarily, it's been noticed at a prior meeting that there was an intent, but if it's by unanimous consent, then it can be done at that same meeting without prior notice.
So I just want
I
to.
think that's what we've done in the past.
I want to screen share this. It's on the notice that was sent out. So.
So
Is that the amended notice?
Yes, that is the updated. I just sent you the wrong version. I just sent just now, but I'll resend this out to you guys right now.
No, that's great. I don't need to see it. I don't need another piece of email, but I don't know, maybe other people do.
Nope, I'm good.
Thank you.
That's good. Thank you,
Thank
Michelle.
you.
We're all set. Yep.
So you saved the day. As
usual.
So why don't we, now that we know that we actually can discuss streets and sidewalks and ADA compliance, let's talk about it. Randy, do you want to talk a little bit about your process and then we can get into questions?
Sure. We provided you with quite a bit of information. A couple of things. Judy caught an error on one thing. We had sent some revised information over.
there seemed to be some confusion with the CDTC, and I know David sent an email out, hopefully clarified that. Happy to answer any questions that come about. But really what we're using right now is our most recent 2019 data that we have. We've already in the process of starting our 2021 CDTC review of the streets. And one of the things that we've talked to them about is in the past, we've gotten the information and the ratings from them so late in the year because it is such a time-consuming process. They have committed to provide us with those, with the ratings in October. So that'll help. I know, in the past, this list went out in January this year. We tried to get it out at the end of November, and we'd like to even, get that out even sooner in the future. So really what that data showed us is really, generally speaking, using the 2019 baseline, it was basically, we were looking at wards that had streets in excess of 28% poor. And really what we focused on in 2020 and a continued focus in 21 is wards 1 through 5 and 14. There are some other wards that are starting to creep up, and we'll continue to reevaluate these and keep an eye on things as we progress and move forward out in the future years. So we have made some pretty good progress, and just, I'm here to help answer any questions that anyone has this evening. So thank you.
Excellent. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Randy, I have a question about Washington Avenue, which is shared partially by the 12th, partially by the 13th, partially by the 15th. And it just seems to me that
I would just note that your microphone, you sound a little robotic, so I don't know if there's something wrong with your mic. We can hear you, so you can keep going, but
okay, how's it now?
it's the same, but we can understand you.
Oh,
It's very hard to understand them.
Which is not
Washington Avenue.
Yeah, which is not in your paving list for this year, but it's shared, at least a section of it that I'm thinking needs improvement. It's shared by the 12th, 13th, and 15th. And it gets a tremendous amount of traffic. I don't know, I know you patched it up, but I think it needs more than that.
I would just second that.
And that, although that's a main road, it's not a state highway, so I don't think we get any. Is that eligible for any financial assistance?
I caught the last part of that, Mike, and yes, I do believe it is eligible for a federal aid. The issue is there's really no federal aid available right now. The most recent TIP update runs through 2024, and really all the funds have already been spoken for. So, what the future brings in the near future, we'll keep our fingers crossed and hopefully looking at some additional funding becomes available. And I think that would be something, a candidate. We've got some, there's some pretty big stretches of some major roadways in the city that are going to need some attention in the next few years. So hopefully something becomes available.
And I get some questions, but I'll do it in a private conversation about some of this strictly 12th Ward residential streets. But better I do that in a private conversation with you than right here.
Sure.
Do we have other questions that members would like to ask? Go ahead, Judy.
So I found it interesting that we're looking at the number 28% of poor roads. How was it that was a standard that. And by poor, I want to clarify, by poor, it's your ratings of 1 through 5. It's not the equity agenda's ratings of 1 through 3. The resolution that was passed talked about 1 through 3, and we've never gotten a breakdown for 1 through 3, I don't believe.
Now, there are no 1s, there's no 2s, and there may be, I don't even know, Judy, maybe a couple 3s in the city. And some of those 3s, we've actually revised our inventory because some of those were parking lots, gravel roads, things of that nature. So we're really looking through is basically anything that's really in the city is scored as a 4 or 5 is really generally considered poor condition.
Right. And so the standard that you're, or a significant measure that you're looking at is 28% poor roads. Why is that? Why, how did that number come up?
That number was the citywide average based upon the most recent 2019 CDTC data. So you went back to 2019 when we received that data, it showed that the citywide average was roughly about 28% poor. And really throughout, CDTC started doing these studies back in 2006, I believe. And really through that, from 2006 to 2019, the citywide average ranged roughly between anywhere between 25 and 28%.
So I find it interesting that there's only 4 wards then that fall below or fall above that threshold, depending upon how you want to look at it with regard to, and that's 2, 3, 5, and 14 have more than 28% poor according in 2020. And you know, I want to say I have long, especially having lived in the 3rd ward for 10 years, I've long been an advocate on making sure that our resources are equitably distributed and to make up for past inequities. But I don't, I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea that somehow or other 28% almost seems like where we want to measure from or what we want to be making sure we don't have more than that in a particular ward, as opposed to potentially, you know, setting the threshold or the goals as at 20%, which is still significant depending upon, especially I have some roads that I have no doubt in my ward should be characterized, classified as a 3 or a 4, rather than a 5, and in some cases a 6. But I just wanted to note that I was kind of wondering how we came up with that number. Now I understand it. I see that the goal for 2021, the average would be with the recommendations you're making, 21.5% would be the poor roads, which is closer to a goal, overall goal of, you know, a maximum of 20%, and that there is less deviation, but there is would still be significant deviation with regard to 14, 2, and 3 still from that average. I am, you know, when we make decisions for equity, I do think it's important that the data that we have is accurate. And I did provide the mayor's office, and I did subsequently share it with you and Sergio, and I think Frank Zioli, photos of several streets in my ward, I think like 10 streets really, where the conditions are really appalling. What I find interesting is that one of the streets that is appearing on next year's list, half of that is rated as 6. And if our goal is to reduce the percentage of poor streets, I am generally not in favor of repaving streets that are as 6 when we have much worse streets in a particular ward. And I did go back and look at some of the recommendations I've made, in the photos I shared, and most of those streets have had National Grid work done on it. So it is something that I'm kind of, in particular, I'm talking about the middle segment of Forest Avenue showing up. The other issue I have is West Erie shows up on your 3-year plan for between New Scotland and Fairview, and I'd like to understand how that is currently showing as being in fair condition, and that winds up on your 3-year plan, but Parkwood that is next to it does not. Maplewood, that is in awful shape on the other side of West Erie, is also is on that list, but really should be on our paving list for this year, considering the awful conditions there. So I'm wondering how West Erie between New Scotland and Fairview winds up on a 3-year plan when it is currently not rated a 5, or shouldn't be rated a 5 because it was paved within the last 6 years. And I've driven it. I've driven after seeing it because I was like wondering what I missed.
Well, hopefully, Judy, I can clear up a few of these items here. First off, our data that we get and that we got from CDTC, we had to set a baseline, which we did, and that baseline was 28% poor. Looking out, trying to achieve a 20% poor rating in the city in a short-term goal is unrealistic. It's unattainable. Right now, as you can see, even going out through 21, and the amount of streets that we're paving, the amount of work that we're doing, we're struggling to get some of these wards below that 28% mark. So that 28% was a baseline we set in achieving a short-term goal. These goals will be revised, and we get these CDTC reports every 2 years. So for us to go in, as you had mentioned about, you're kind of debating some of the scores on some of the streets, and we don't necessarily argue with that because there is deterioration occurring, but we can't go citywide on a yearly basis. It's not possible for us to go out there and start changing scores in a ward. So everybody's on the same playing field. And then when we get the 21 data, we'll have more accurate information, and we'll also have enough data available to us that we can start applying a reasonable deterioration rate. So really what we're looking at here is a snapshot in time. Some of the other issues you brought up regarding some of the 3-year candidates and everything, those are years out. We're open to suggestions. We're open to discussions. Really, this discussion tonight is for the bonds on hand and the street list. But we're open to any suggestions, any comments. And this isn't a perfect process by any means. It's the best that we have with the data that we have available. But considering the undertaking that CDTC takes with multiple staff members, this process takes them over 10 months to complete. It is a robust, comprehensive survey that they do, and that's the data that we get. We're only getting it every 2 years.
So, but even using your current data, why would we be repaving a street this year in a particular ward that is in fair condition, according to your data, according to CDTC?
Because CDTC is only one small tool that we use, and it doesn't preclude or override our engineering experience and our evaluation. Last year, if you recall, you told us that Forest Ave was one of the worst streets in your ward. So we addressed that. But due to the amount of work, the time of the work, the time that's involved in the work, and the funding that's involved, we couldn't complete the entire street. So it only makes sense for us to finish what we started and complete that whole thing. And whether we're debating whether this is a 5 or a 6 in a rating, this isn't something that the computer is going to spit out and tell us what streets we can pave, because we have coordination with National Grid gas main replacements, their planned work, Albany Water Department, their planned work, Albany Housing Authority, planning, Habitat for Humanity. I mean, the list goes on and on. The last thing we want to do is go in and pave a street and somebody come in and tear the street back up in a year, 2 years after. Emergencies happen, things happen, but that's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to get the most for our money and our longevity.
So I just want to clarify that when I talked about Forest Avenue last year, it was between Helderberg and New Scotland, and I'm always very specific, and then also between Bethlehem Terrace and Hackett. The interim portion of that street, while it certainly could use repaving, is not in a condition that that is as bad as something like Maplewood or Park Avenue that I've specifically pointed out. I'm thrilled that you have scheduled Hanson Avenue. Ontario Street is also in much worse condition than that particular segment of Forest. With regard to each one of those streets that I have mentioned, I have confirmed that National Grid work has been done on those streets. And on Maplewood, people were complaining before the National Grid work was done. They've been complaining to me for years, and now the National Grid work, of course, has made things worse, as it will, on most streets. And I absolutely agree. I've learned that Parkwood, between New Scotland and Fairview, hasn't had National Grid work done on it. It's in very rough shape. I know that you guys have been doing some patching on it, and that's appreciated. I would love to get the National Grid work done, but then I'm also realizing National Grid will probably want to go down the street, and we just had the other part of Parkwood repaved 2 years ago. So, that's a challenge. I understand those challenges. I just don't understand why something like Maplewood would not, or Park or Ontario would not be prioritized over a street with a rating of a 6 that is currently admittedly in fair condition.
I'd debate the 6 rating, Judy, and you've got curb issues over there, sidewalk issues. We also have to look at a host of other factors that are involved in the amount of sidewalk work that we can realistically complete in 1 year, the amount of curbing, because our projects are becoming more involved with sidewalk and curbing in many areas is the paving, the resurfacing of the road is almost a secondary aspect. It's the least expensive of the work that we're doing. It's the least time consuming. And realistically, in the Northeast, we have about a 20-week construction schedule. So we can't pave 30 streets that are going to take us 4 weeks apiece on sidewalks. So there's a lot of other balancing that goes on with this program and a lot of other factors that come into play. And again, you know, I'm not here to debate the condition of a 5 or a 6, but in our opinion, that road is deteriorated. And again, it doesn't make sense for us to start something and we'd like to finish that stretch over there.
I have no more questions.
Do we have other questions? Go ahead, Mike.
Brief question. I get a couple of examples, and I'm not going to mention them here, but I would talk with you about them, where a street that's probably a 6 or 5 has just some small sections that are really bad, usually around storm drains. And, you know, sometimes when you opt to pave a whole block, I think it's unnecessary if you just simply maybe even use your in-house crew to pave, you know, 1/6 of that block, particularly, you know, around the, at least this is my experience. And I can meet with you and give you my examples of it where maybe a whole block is waiting an extra year or 2 or 3, and there's really only one section of it, which the in-house crew could probably do, rather than just the normal street patching. I mean, where they actually mill a little bit of it and pave it. I can give you examples when I meet with you.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, we'd be happy to discuss that, but that you know, with DGS would definitely need to be involved in those discussions as that's a realistic request. And I think something like that can be done with the in-house crews, with
Yes.
the contracted work. Yes, that runs us into a whole nother issue with ADA and complete streets with the contracted work. But yeah, I think Frank and the commissioner, I think they'd be happy to look at some options there.
Okay, I'll send you a note to sit down with you guys next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Kathy, do you have a follow-up, or Kathy, do you mind letting Kathy go and then you can?
Let's have Kathy go.
Thanks, Randy. What the hell was my question? Oh, I know. You know, CDTC is great. We have that service, but I know it's easy for streets to fall through the cracks over the years. It just,
No pun intended.
right, especially those little dead ends in particular. I talked to you about a couple of those today in an email. So I guess I was wondering, do you keep track, like a listing of the streets and the years and the work that was done on each street? And is that something that would be worthwhile to keep track of? Because then you could take a look at a section, say, wow, this street, hasn't had any work in 20 years. And, really, that might be one we might want to take a closer look at. I was just wondering if there's any value to approaching things that way a little bit.
Yeah, we do keep a record of work summaries. You go back before like 2000, the records are kind of a little sparse to say. But yeah, I mean, we're looking back and you can see when something hasn't been addressed and it's not even on that list. So if we have that work summary right now from 2000, We look at that right now, and if there's not a street on there, we know that that street hasn't been paved in over 20 years at this point. So we can cross-reference. But it is helpful too. There's a lot of
But is
streets-
that, but is that only when someone brings that street to your attention?
What's that?
Or
No. What was that?
is that, do you only look at that though when someone brings that street to your attention at all? Or is this?
Well, no. I mean, it's going to show up on the CDTC report if it's listed in the inventory. And I'm not aware of anything that's on our local highway inventory right now that we're missing a street. So we'd be looking at the rating, and that street would be listed in the overall inventory. And it would be, if I'm assuming if it hasn't been paved in over 20 years, it's more than likely fallen into in poor condition.
So when you have a street that is, you have a group of streets in poor condition, you know, how do you even choose between them? If you had a date for when it was last done, would that be helpful?
It sure wouldn't hurt. I mean, the more information we have, the better. But yeah, I mean, in the past, we've done some roads. I had a conversation with a woman. Her son was 35 years old, was born in the house was in the street.
We lost you there, Randy. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I said I had talked to a resident at one point that her son was 35 years old and was born in the house, and the street had never been paved.
Yeah, and I believe that.
Yeah.
So if there's a way we can avoid that kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Judy, you had a follow-up question, and Richard has a question as well.
Yeah, so, so we're being asked to approve these 3 bonds tonight so we can act on them on Monday. When are you putting together the RFP? Because, I had wanted to talk to you today, but I felt like that's cruel and unusual punishment along with everything else that's going on that DGS is responsible for today, and, everything I was doing for neighbors. And now, I'm curious about, I want to walk the sidewalks, for the streets that, and that's a little challenging. So I'm wondering, when do you make a final decision regarding what goes into the RFP?
Well, our goal right now is to have contract 1 out and have those plans ready to go to bid about the middle of January. And then contract 2 would probably follow about a month later.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Judy, I'm happy to talk to you anytime.
Yeah, so, yeah, because I mean, I'd love for you to drive, the couple streets that I'm talking about. But kind of, the next 2 days doesn't count. It's not a good time to.
Snow can fill in the potholes sometimes. Go ahead. Go ahead, Richard.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. Some of it relates to the current list. Some of it does relate to the 3-year list and something else. So, I have 2 streets and, I take what I get and it's never much, but anyway, the upper part of Spring Street is also going to continue for next year as well, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you clarify on the Lark Street Improvement Project? That's just designed for next year?
That is correct.
And so
Yep.
that funding would not be reflected here, but it's part of Capital District Regional funding, or?
That's a federal aid, both in Henry Johnson Boulevard. We put those on the list. Those are federal aid projects.
Yep.
So Lark Street Rich, we'll be looking to go to design in 21. And the same thing with Henry Johnson, and both of those projects will be in design next year. And then we'll be looking to go to construction in 2022.
Right, so nothing we won't see any kind of construction this year, just the design phase. Question, looking at the 3-year prospective list, and one of the other streets that are out there, 2 streets, is J Street, which I know is a kind of a sensitive area topic to deal with, but that it's not on the 3-year list. Does that mean it's not on like the radar screen, or where might that fall, if anywhere, if we were ever able to come to consensus on what to do there?
Yes, J Street's a little bit of a different animal, and I thought it was on the list, Rich, but I'll double check. If it's not, it should be.
I'm looking at the 3-year list, and I don't see it there.
Oh, either do I.
And I know the 3-year list is not what we're not bonding for that now or anything like that. It's just
No.
like kind of what's on the horizon.
We're open to comments, suggestions from council members. Kathy shot me a quick email today, and everyone should feel free to do that. And honestly, I've already got folders together for projects in 2022 and 23.
All right.
So, we plan years in advance, and the sooner we get the information, the better off. So Don't be shy. Send us some, if you have comments, suggestions, things you want added, by all means.
Can I just follow up on what Richard was talking about? Because the Hudson Park Neighborhood Association, which we share, they did a report about streets and sidewalks. I sent it to you, Randy. But
And I sent it to Dave too, so hopefully he shared it with everyone as well.
But one of the issues is in that area, they have some of those streets with the brick pavers.
Yes.
And it's a huge issue because they're a mess, at least over by Park. And but it sounds like the neighborhood really wants to keep them, right, Rich? So how do we begin to address an issue like that?
Yeah, that's the issue on J Street, and then which is on my ward, and then in your ward is Park Avenue, Kathy, which I assume is the same issue.
Yeah.
Which is also a brick street, or
it's a mess because it's a mix of bricks and the macadam.
Yeah, and
how do we begin to tackle that?
That's a good question. And because what we did on J Street is we got a consultant on board to look at some options over there. The challenge is those streets were constructed an awful long time ago using materials, methods, labor. Today, to redo something like that, talking to a lot of contractors, they all rip them out, but very, very few, if any of them, replace. So it becomes very labor intensive, and it becomes very costly to replace them. So I think with something like that, and what we looked at with J Street trying to move forward is obviously you've got to get the community's input on these. And that's a difficult and a challenge, because some of the price tags on these projects are, you can be spending as much on one street as we bond for the entire city for the whole year. So the price tags are exceptionally high.
It's an interesting problem because, that whole area is very historic.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of reasons to want to keep those brick pavers there. We're also putting a lot of money into the Beaver Creek restoration plan that's right along Park, for example, and then Lincoln Park in particular. So I don't know, I think we're going to have to look more closely at the whole issue, but I get what you're saying about the cost. So, thank you.
Alfredo? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, yeah, so we'll continue to have that discussion on J. Another question, which I don't think it's part of this bond, but it's just a question I have. The removal, and this is a sidewalk issue probably, and I think this year or last year, the department did extensive removal of blacktop in certain areas where sidewalks were blacktopped, or the strip between a sidewalk and the building was blacktopped. And I don't know if it falls into your area, Randy, or not, but it's an issue. Is that something? I mean, I have certain areas, especially in Park South and parts of Hudson Park, which are extensive with blacktop, which does detract. In Park South is an urban renewal district, which doesn't seem to be getting a lot of attention as it should. But is that something that we can work on? Also, a number of sidewalks, which are really not handicapped accessible, especially in Park South, the way they've heaved and broken up and things like that. And I just was wondering how we can get a comprehensive review of that in terms of the current condition there, and maybe try to put together a plan to begin to address that.
Sure. Sometimes there's isolated areas. If there's isolated tripping hazards, a lot of times that's something that DGS will be able to address in-house with their concrete crew. As far as the question on the asphalt, there were areas that were a priority that we were removing the asphalt sidewalks and replacing them with concrete. There is no plan or that I'm aware of that's looking to replace asphalt maintenance strips, basically between the curb and the sidewalk. That was more geared towards the kind of isolated areas that still remained in the city that had just predominant, just everything was asphalt.
All right, I do have some areas like that also.
Yeah, if you have certain areas, yeah, bring them to our attention, and yeah, we'll be happy to look at them.
Okay, another question. I know we tend to do everything by wards, which I really don't think is a good way to measure how we make investments in neighborhoods. Because, you know, in my ward, for example, I have 4 different neighborhoods. They're not all alike. And Park South is very much different from Center Square. And Park South is more of a low income, working class, high immigrant area. But we tend to think that, all of my ward is Center Square. And so a lot of neighborhoods get overlooked, or we're not really measuring equitable investment because we look at wards. Is it possible to, we do have ward lines, and the city, has identified addresses by, neighborhood lines, and the city does has identified addresses by neighborhoods. Is it possible to, and I'm not asking you to do it, but to reconstruct a list like this by neighborhood so that we can really have a better sense as to where we're making investments, where the needs are, rather than looking at this artificial ward line construct?
I think that's a conversation that you'd have to have with the mayor's office, Rich, maybe David.
Yeah. Well, I guess the question is the capability there that it could easily be done?
It's a good question. We would need to look into that closer.
All right.
Alfredo had his hand up, but Mike, I see you and you'll be next. So go ahead, Alfredo.
National Grid. So they have been whipping through my streets, and streets that were just paved maybe 6, 7 years ago are now cut up. Are they reimbursing the city for any of these damages? And now we may now have to repave a street that maybe we paved 6, 7, 8 years ago, which was in good solid shape until they came in and just cut all these holes. So that's my first question.
What, I know Gary Bowl in DGS tracks all the street opening permits and works closely with National Grid. I'm not sure if you have specific, but Gary takes care of all those.
Okay.
Something that engineering is only reviews. And application wise, we don't oversee their work. I know National Grid pays an enormous amount of disturbance fees to the city every year.
Well,
I don't know what those figures are because my department
Residents.
doesn't track that.
Okay. And if I've gotten complaints from residents with the contractors that work with National Grid, who should they be contacting? Who should I be contacting them or connecting them with?
That should go through Gary at DGS.
Gary?
Gary Bowl.
Okay, I appreciate that information.
Hey, Mike.
Welcome.
A follow-up on something that Richard brought up, the fact that ward lines are arbitrary, neighborhood lines are more consistent. And like I'm looking at, you have a 3-year street paving candidates and they're all identified by ward. And yet in 2021 or 2022, sometime around then, the ward lines are going to change dramatically. 10 years ago, they changed. I know my ward, 50% of the geography changed. And that wasn't exclusive to me. A lot of wards changed dramatically. Very arbitrary, I thought. But anyway, I remember when the two committees that debated the equity agenda, the Council Operations Committee and the General Services Committee, this issue was brought up. And I remember it wasn't corrected as of the night that the mayor came in front of the council and pushed the passage of the equity agenda on that very night. And the answer was, we're not going to drop the ball. We're going to look into that. Well, the census is here this year, which means that we're going to be doing a reapportionment committee, which will probably produce their work not in time for 2021 election, but redraft the lines in 2022. So all your plans, all your 3-year plans based on wards are scrambled. And so to follow up on what Richard said, there was a promise from the mayor's office that they were going to follow up on that problem. And it's still defined by ward lines and they're going to be scattered, totally changed. For in no cognizable reason. It's like I've seen them go, the last time they went through my presidential streets like a saw, zigs and zags. So I really think that's something, if it's going to be real long-term equitable planning, you have to have a more defined boundary, like a neighborhood. They don't come out and change, the neighborhood associations don't come out and change their boundaries dramatically every 10 years. The wards do. So that's still a big gap in the equity agenda. And the promise was from the mayor's office the night that we passed it.
I don't know what to say to that, Mike, other than, the Division of Engineering is open to suggestions, ideas. If things change down the line, it's an ever-changing world, and we'll adapt to it as needed. The overarching conversation, I'm not aware of the details of that. But again, we're here, we're open-minded, we're open to suggestions, we're open to input. Apologize, I had to turn my video off, I had to just go grab a charger for my phone, so apologize for that. But again, Mike, we're here to help and we're open to suggestions.
Okay, thank you.
Nick Riley, did you want to note that there were $850,000 budgeted for street openings in 2021?
Yeah, in 2021, there's $850,000 budgeted for street openings from DGS. I'm sorry, I'm not the most versed on DGS's revenues to know exactly about how that's collected, but yeah, that's what the budget was for 2021. In 2020, it was $750,000. So we are collecting reimbursements for street openings, Alfredo.
Thanks, Nick.
Yep.
Are there other questions? So if there are no other, actually, I just wanted to make a note, and this has nothing to do with passing this forward, but Randy, and I know Tom has actually a bigger issue with this than I have in my ward, because his streets without sidewalks are more dangerous than my streets without sidewalks. I just want to put a pitch out there. I know it is expensive to put in sidewalks. I know not everybody wants them. I know it's a process, but it is something that is very important. And I know many council members, including myself and Tom, are very interested in expanding the sidewalks in the ward. And so I'm bringing that up because that has nothing to do with these specific ordinances, but I feel like every time we talk about sidewalks, we need to bring that up, because there's a lot of places that have no sidewalks whatsoever that would be happy with asphalt. I mean, anything would be great. So
Yeah, again, we're open to suggestions, we're open to input. We are limited, we have limited resources, but if a lot of things aren't brought to our attention, sometimes we're not aware of it, or we're not aware of the sense of urgency or the priority associated with it.
I will say, I know that Tom, I can definitely share with you the streets in my ward that don't have sidewalks, but I know there's a lot of sense of urgency for Russell Road and Tom, just based on his describing of it and my own walking on it. I know it's very dangerous and there's a lot of kids that walk on it. So we will follow up with you. And I don't know if you want to say anything, Tom, you're welcome to, but Richard, when you're done, Richard has his hand up.
Brad Glass was up a couple of weeks ago and walked. Russell Road is my main concern. It's County Road 203 right to the city line, and then it becomes Russell Road. But it's one of the main arteries up in this part of Albany, and it connects right to the school. So parents can't walk their children to school. You just can't do it. I tried it a few times, and almost got hit. When we were showing Brad the area, there was at least 4 cars almost hit us. So it's we need to get something done. And I know I see David there, and I know I've expressed this to David. So I think it's just getting the resources there. But the people up in this part of the town, a while ago I had asked, it'd be nice to know what the people in my area say is, we're paying taxes. What are we getting for our taxes? And that, in my mind, that's part of the equity, that we should be getting the same services that the rest of the city gets, because we're contributing. So thank you for letting me talk.
Go ahead, Richard.
If my hand was up, it was an accident.
Well, I just like calling on you, so I'm kidding. So if there's no other questions, could I get a motion for ordinance 37.102.20?
So moved to move it out of committee with a positive recommendation.
Excellent. Could I get a second?
I'll second that.
Mike seconds.
This is the street reconstruction ordinance.
This is the street reconstruction, yes. All in favor? That's unanimous. Could I get a movement? Could I get a recommendation on ordinance 38.102.20?
Sidewalks.
And that would be the sidewalks, yes.
Move that forward out of committee with a positive recommendation.
And a second? Mike? All in favor? Now, can I get a motion on 39.102.20? That's the ADA compliance
And that's as amended.
as amended.
What was the amendment?
It was reduced from, I believe, 650,000 to 300,000.
Because I believe there's funds left over. Can
So
I
I'll move that forward, make a motion to move that forward with a positive recommendation.
get Alfredo seconds? All in favor? That's unanimous. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone so much for a long evening, but important evening. And thank you so much to staff. I really appreciate the tag team of the Knicks always. Randy, thanks for coming in and talking through all of it with us. And David, who is not here, we appreciate him. And of course, always appreciate our incredible staff, Danielle and Michelle. We appreciate you so much. And thanks so much. Have a great night. Please stay safe and good luck shoveling.
We'll see you on Monday.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Have a good one, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.